welcome to Reco12. My name's Lisa.S and I have the disease of alcoholism. We'll begin with a moment's silence, guys, for the still suffering addict inside and outside the Zoom rooms. And the wee version of the set aside prayer. Dear God, please set aside anything we think we know about ourselves, about our disease, about the big book, the 12 steps, the program, the fellowship, the people in the fellowship, and all spiritual terms, especially you, God, so that we may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help us to see the truth. We surrender this next hour to you. Your will, not ours, be done. Amen. So I'm very blessed to be the host of this meeting and podcast in the Afro-Euro Timezones. I hope that you'll join us and draw strength and hope from these podcasts that we will host Fridays at 8 a.m. UK time and 10 a.m. European, South African time. Reco12 is an organisation with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others. Speakers from our past meetings have represented many fellowships, addictions and afflictions. We look forward to continuing to add to the diversity of speakers and backgrounds. And I hope you'll reach out if you think your experience, strength and hope will benefit this special community. Today's speaker is Max, who'll be sharing for around 30 minutes or however long comfortable, Max. And we'll get him to share, followed by questions and answers afterwards. First, for a bit of business, Reco12 Family of Recovery Resources continues to grow and has more and more resources for the addict and the loved ones of those addicted. We have a couple of exciting projects, one of which is the Big Book Roundtable discussion, where we dive into the first 164 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with a few recovered individuals who are past speakers in Reco12 and really try to know and live the Big Book. Reco12 Tradition 7 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our Step 12 in this manner. We gratefully accept one-time contributions through PayPal, Venmo, and Wise through the links in the chat. We also offer a monthly subscription program called Reco12 Spearheads. To join in and help support these cool projects, please consider donating at www.reco12.com/support. Or you can click on the link in the chat or also on the website of Reco12. So we look forward each meeting to growing deeper in effectiveness and understanding as we learn from and with our special speakers. Today, we're very blessed with Max here today. And Max is blessed by the grace of God to be clean and sober for 3 years and 9 months. Fantastic, Max. And Max is going to talk this morning around step 3, powerless, and some honesty. So over to you, Max. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Lisa. Thank you for letting me be of service. My name is Max and I'm an addict. And also hello to the people attending, Lisa and Mark. God bless you guys. I'm very grateful to be part of CA because I know without CA, I would be dead by now. That's for sure. I grew up in a family of actors and musicians, people who were quite narcissistic, theater actors, also German film actors, people who are like seeking for attention most of the time, right? So that's why also my parents would basically seek my attention. At the same time, they were also like emotionally abandoning me, and they were not often present. I grew up fatherless. My father lived up north, not so far from Hamburg, Lisa. 160 kilometers from Hamburg is Hanover. That's the capital of another German state, and that's where he lives, and also some brothers of mine and my uncle, and they are all active addicts. They are all active addicts still today. My mother is not, but all these people were basically not there, right? When I grew up, my father and my mother, and when they were there, I tried to do everything to keep them happy, you know, like a dog who wags its tail, honestly, you know, as a child. But I didn't know that back then, right? So today we would call this people pleasing, right? I became a people pleaser when I grew up in order to get the attention of the people I loved, my parents. And yeah, but I didn't know all these things back then, right? I was just a child and I was looking for belongingness. I was looking for a place in this world. I was looking for people who are there, who I could talk to, right? But they weren't really there. I didn't have these people. They were definitely not available. So I looked for other role models, right? And when I became 12, 13 years old, I would look around the neighborhood, you know, these guys who were like tall and, you know, like bragging all day long and acting like big men, basically, you know, they were like 14 or 15, and these people became my role models. And they actually already smoked cannabis, and they offered it to me regularly when I was 12 years old, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't take it, right? I tried it one time and I had to vomit, and I didn't like it at all. And yeah, 1 or 2 years passed by. In the meantime, every holidays I would go to Hanover in order to see my father and my brother. And my brother became my hero, you know. Today I know, back then my brother was my higher power, you know. Back then my brother was my higher power, because as a child, you know, you look for God, and people who are older than you, who are more mature, you don't look for God as thoroughly as an adult does, you know. So yeah, my brother was my higher power back then. My brother was a what's the word, delinquent. He was in a group home. He had a tough childhood, and he would smoke weed all day long. And at the same time, he had some respect on the streets with the people on the streets in the neighborhood. And so I looked up to him, right? And when I went there on holidays, it was fucking beautiful, you know. It was really beautiful. I loved going there on holidays to Hanover. It was like, I don't know, man, you know, it like another planet. I was totally into it. And I already started going there alone by the age of 8. By the age of 8, I would take the train, you know, from Frankfurt to Hanover, 350 kilometers. That's like 200, 190, 200 miles. I would take the train, and the train ride would last 2.5 hours. And I was very, very eager to get a spot in the TV cabin. They had one wagon with TV sets, right, in the behind the seats installed. It was 1990, like 36 years ago, 1990. So there weren't any smartphones, right? So I had to get a spot there, and I would fight my way through all the adults every time. And every time I would get my spot in order to watch my films, you know, in order to get what I want. And today I know that's basically normal, you know, for a child like this, you know, growing up totally emotionally abandoned, you know, I had to fight for what I wanted in this world, right? So I did. And yeah, but as a teenager, like 6 years later, I was still like saying I had a strong will, you know, I would get what I wanted. But at the same time, I was always convinced that people are against me, that I don't belong, that I am wrong. I was totally convinced of that. And yeah, when I met peers, you know, uh, people at my age, I thought the same, of course, I was convinced that they are against me. And when one of these people, when I was 14 years old, passed me a spliff first time, I took it, and I took a spliff, and man, it was like, what they call a quick fix. It was like, I was home immediately for the first time in my life, for the first time in these 14 years on this planet. I was arriving. I was basically creating an inner shelter. Or let's put it this way, the drug, the substance, the effect was creating an inner shelter, which I never had before, never. And I was hooked from the first time, So today I know it's not about the high, For me, it was about my inner shelter, arriving within me, being home, being at peace with myself, being at ease with myself, being at ease with you guys, being part of this universe. That's what, in the beginning, cannabis gave me. And I was hooked, and I wanted to have more. From the very beginning, I wanted to have more. I became greedy, and I wanted to have more. So during my entire teenage years, it didn't take long. I refused going to school. I didn't go to school anymore. And I stole bicycles every day just to get some cannabis, because my mother, like half a year afterwards, she realized that there's something wrong with me. She didn't give me money anymore, right? So, and sometimes I even stole from her purse. But when all that stuff didn't work anymore, I wanted to get my dope, So I would steal a bicycle, petty theft from a seller, and bring it to an addict, to these heroin addicts in the neighborhood, and gave it to them, and they gave me some dope, and that's how it worked. So very quickly, I isolated myself, right? I got this dope during, and I got it, and I smoked it, and most of the time I smoked it alone. And when I was with people, I would check if they have something, in order to smoke their dope. I was basically isolating myself from a very early age. And therefore, it was not this beautiful high from the beginning anymore, but I was chasing it like crazy. I was chasing this high for 25 years. Although I had phases, later on, when I would basically, and it says like this in the big book, we have stages of our using when we can still quit, like this, like a plug in my head. I could do this when I was 19 or 20. It was not useful anymore to use or to drink, because I wanted to make something in life, right? I wanted to get a job. I wanted to have a proper relationship. I wanted to go to university, whatever, all these things. So I did. So at the beginning, when I was like 22, I guess, I went to evening school, and I passed my, what's the word, high school diploma. And in order to go to college, to university, and I did. But, over all these years, when I was clean, I was never emotionally, spiritually clean, right? My head was often running riot because of bullshit. I would wear white sneakers on the subway, and someone like slightly touched it with his or her feet, and I was getting really pissed. And often I stole my emotions. I wasn't able to talk about them. I was so trapped in my head, I wasn't able to talk about them. And one day later, I developed a resentment toward a person, right? I did not even know why. Today, I would say, yeah, I never got into action, right? I wasn't able to talk to people, and because I was without my solution, right? And at the same time, I was without God, So I didn't have access to myself. I didn't have the life that I have today. And speaking of coming to honesty now, I was never honest, I was never honest. And I was never able to basically be on eye level with anyone, right? I was always below or above the other people, you know. I didn't know what humility was, right? But yeah. So in the long run, I always relapsed, right? And it got worse from relapse to relapse to relapse. And 8 years ago, I went into my first meeting. And in this meeting, I wore a gold bracelet. I was very arrogant. I was already working in a well-paid job. I was a teacher back then. And I realized, I slightly figured that I could have an issue, you know, with using coke, because at this time it had become the very drug of my choice. I was already quite hooked, and you know, it was not as easy as anymore. It was not so easy anymore to just quit. You know, the the quality and the intensity of my using was increasing. I used more often. I used much longer. And I would already, you know, feel like a strange feeling under my skin once in a while, you know, being very paranoid. And when the birds were chirping in the morning, I hated it. I hated the chirping of the birds, you know, like it's written down in one of our stories in our book, Hope, Basic Courage. It's like that. It was exactly like that, you know, so it was quite bad. And the more it became worse, the more I used. The more I used. In the meantime, I had become a father of 2 children. And in summer 2020, like 2.5 years before, after I went to my first meeting, I even had to leave the apartment because of an argument, and things got worse and worse. And that was when the drugs lost their effect. I was living in a flop house in Frankfurt's red light district, and I was using all day long, and cannabis, alcohol, coke, and I was just staring at the wall all the time, you know. And by the end of this year, I was awake for 4 days in a row, and I had tried for 24 hours to eat a €1 burger from McDonald's. It was a small burger, and I had tried to eat it for 24 hours, and I couldn't. And then at a certain point, I collapsed, and I knew already, because it was the 3rd overdose this year, I knew that I'm overdosing again. And I called the paramedics, and I told them that I'm in the red light district in a flop house and that I used a lot of drugs. So they took, I don't know, 50 minutes, an hour to come by. And but you know, the thing is, when they came, they didn't touch me. I was lying on the floor, and I was full of sweat, and I was crying, and I was afraid to die. And
got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Reco12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform.
really, I stopped breathing for a moment, you know. I stopped breathing, and I was sweating, and it was December, you know, it was fucking cold outside, and I was sweating a lot, and I stopped breathing. And then I just prayed, and I just said, please, God, let me live. And I was fucking desperate, you know, and yeah, God let me live. And I know that this prayer saved my life. And I also know that it saved my life because I had been to the meetings and I knew that there was a loving God who protects us. So I would like to read a passage from the big book now. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there's no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there's no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. And the other, to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to, and we're willing to make the effort. So, after this overdose, I was not honest yet, and I was not really willing, but I was afraid to die. So I went to a long term, and after 5 weeks, I relapsed again, and then I started to control, you know, by using. So the obsession was still very present. I used less, and I didn't combine the substances anymore, and I was still actively using for 14 months. And there were many other rock bottoms, but no overdoses anymore. But in the end, I also almost lost my right leg. The doctor said, we will soon have to remove your right leg. And yeah, and there were other things happening. And in the end, you know, in the long run, I found myself in April 2022 in a men's shelter in a suburb of Frankfurt, living there unofficially in an addict's room. He was an old heroin addict, and I was just living there because I didn't have a place anymore. And I was trying to drink or to smoke pot a little. It didn't work anymore. You know, I was coughing all the time and I was in a bad state. And then I was skipping through the movies that this guy had. You know, this guy had an old laptop with 7 or 8 movies. And in one of these movies, and today I know God sent me this movie. In one of these movies, a guy was in a meeting in the United States. And the guy was sharing on how it was and how it is like now. And in this very moment, I was remembered of the meetings. I was remembered of it, reminded of it. And in this moment, a little seed of hope sprung up in my soul. And in this moment, I became willing to do the deal. In this moment, I really, I was basically getting some willingness at this moment, right? So I was packing up my stuff, and I still had one little smartphone. It was a cheap one. It was one little smartphone, but it was a smartphone, right? And I went to Detox, and in Detox, I looked up, you know, the meetings that we have, the online meetings, the 24/7 meetings, and I went through all of them, right? One meeting after the other, AA, CA, NA, you name it, just going to meetings. A meeting, and I was sharing like crazy. I was willing to listening, and I was going to another meeting, and I was just, you know, I was just trying to recover, trying to get to recovery back then. And there was one moment at 2:30 a.m. in the morning when I fell asleep in front of a Zoom meeting, and I had a roommate. And at the next morning, the guy approached me and he said, "Well, Max, these people were concerned about you last night." And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" It was like, "Yeah, they were asking for you if you are well." And I was like, "I don't know what you mean, man." It was like, "Yeah, you were in this meeting, right? And they were really concerned about you. They were asking about your well-being for 2 or 3 minutes." And at this moment, man, something happened in my heart, you know, because when I was using, I was always numbing my heart, my feelings. I didn't want to feel anything anymore. So I had grown an icy heart. And in this moment, the first time, it was melting a little, you know, it was really melting a little, this icy heart. And then I knew that there are people who really care, people who care about me, you know, who are genuinely and sincerely caring, you know, not because they didn't want to get anything out of it. So, after being in detox for 25 days, I immediately went to my first live meeting. I got service as a greeter, and I looked for a sponsor, and I found a sponsor, and it was in another fellowship. I was there for 8 weeks, and I was also going to CA meetings, and they said, well, Max, we're going to our convention in the Netherlands, in Noordwijk, in July. You want to join us? And I was like, yeah, man. And I was joining them. And on the convention, an old timer was sharing how they basically set up and build up CA Europe, you know, the development. It was a workshop on CA history in Europe. And I was so touched by the story, man. I was really touched by the story. And this willingness, you know, which was growing, was basically getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, yeah, man, I want to do this. I want to be part of this fellowship. And I was really touched. And I asked the guy if I could do service immediately. I'm a trained teacher. I want to translate CA literature and all of that. You know, I was raising my hand in the workshop. The guy was like, yeah, well, if you want to do service, just go to this guy and ask him if you can do service here. And I was like bursting out of the room and asking the guy to do service, you know. I was really hooked. And basically the obsession shifted, you know, the obsession from using and drinking shifted to working this program, to doing the deal, to being of service, to helping people, you know. And it was beautiful. So 2 weeks later, I was back in Frankfurt, and I approached the co-founder of CA Germany if he would like to be my sponsor. And he said, yeah, well, I can do that. And shortly afterwards, I learned that the guy whose story had attracted me so much was his sponsor, you know. And again, I could see that God was basically working a lot in my favor, you know. And I started working the steps, and the honesty was already there. I was definitely. I mean, honesty is the principle of step one, right? We admitted. So I'm not an I anymore. I'm a we. I'm part of a fellowship, and I admit something, you know. And this took me quite a while, you know. Step one is the most important step. Step one is the step that we go to 100%. All the other steps are steps of growth, progress, development. But step one is just, you know, full abstinence just for today. The moment that I'm still debating with myself, if I could use in a controlled way, you know, like a gentleman, or, you know, like a person who basically can quit after a while. Then I don't go step one thoroughly. I go step one every day, and it starts with my prayer in the morning. Dear God, please keep me clean and sober today. That's my first prayer, and I speak it after opening my eyes. Lying in bed, I speak it in the first place. And yeah. So yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I started working the steps with the guy, and I didn't have an issue with God. I didn't. The steps worked well, and 2 and 3 were not a big deal for me at this time, you know. No, they weren't. And but when I took inventory, you know, when I was working on step 4, I was scared, you know, because people told me, yeah, many people relapse during step 4, and I don't know. Relapse was the thing I didn't want to think about at all. It was never an option anymore, and it won't ever be an option anymore, and it is not an option anymore. So I basically modified my program, and I worked the inventory after writing my gratitude list in the evening, 20 minutes, you know, in order to avoid pressure, you know, all around. And I wrote for 2 or 3 months, and Then I chatted with my sponsor, and I was sure the guy would despising me, would have contempt for me because my story was the worst of all. But in fact, it was not the case. And so I learned more and more, to be part of this universe, to be part of you guys, to be part of this world, to have a place in this world, to belong. And the other steps, in step 8, I was asking my sponsor, I was like, yeah, man, I have so much debt, with companies, creditors, and whatever. How can I even deal with that? And he was like, yeah, well, step 8 is about become willing, right? So write them down, offer a small installment fee once in a while, and that's all you can do by now. And I did. And they were also accepted, and I made some financial amends, honestly, and basically I made, say, 95%. There are 2 or 3 left that I can't make now because I would have to go there in person, and I don't have this amount of money yet. But God knows that I'm willing, and I made most of them. And that's what I can also recommend, don't shrink at anything. God's got you, Of course, I was very scared to go with some people, and I postponed some events, man. And the beauty of it was, I had one event in a store, where something bad had happened 2 years before. And I went to the store and I took all my courage, and I went there, and the guy was just, talking to me gently, silently, shaking my hand. And I was crying, man, I was really touched, because then I realized the one who hasn't forgiven me yet is here. That's basically the core, the essence. The program is also about forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, forgiving myself. And that's also an iPhone thing, But yeah, it works. It works. And it's a program of action, That's why I have to go there and I have to talk to these people, If I don't, it will remain in my head. And me alone in my head is not a good thing, I need the fellowship. I need the other people. I need the meetings. Yesterday I was in a meeting and I had a great story, someone sharing his story, and parts of it were mine, and using and everything that the guy did was what I did, So you are not alone with this, People in CA are there to help you, We help each other. It's a we program. You don't have to do this alone anymore. No matter how long you've been clean, doesn't matter. And there are times when I get self-complacent, And in these times, I have to be cautious. I have to be careful, calling a newcomer, talking honestly to my sponsor about it, praying, helping others, It says in 7, when all other activities fail, nothing will ensure immunity so much as working with another addict. That's the truth. At the same time, when I don't have a sponsor at the moment, and but I have to be careful to stay in the triangle. Recovery at the bottom, working my program, being in touch with God, going to the meetings, unity, doing service in favor of the group, and service, in all my affairs, being a good person, and doing something for others and for their well-being. And yeah. In order to stay clean and sober, I have 3 sponsees at the moment, and I work with them to stay clean and sober, and it helps me as well, And I love doing service. Service is one of the best things I could ever find, So I have a helpline service on area level. Yeah, thank you for the reminder. I'm a secretary in our men's meeting online, and I set up the table in our biggest meeting in Germany, where I got clean, I still do the same stuff, and I try to stay humble. It's not always easy, but I try, that's basically the message that I have for you guys today. Thank you for letting me be of service, and God bless.
Hey Spearheads, if you're looking to dive deeper into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who live the solution, then you won't want to miss Reco12 Big Book Roundtable. Join David G., Nikki M., and me, the moderator Justin B., 3 recovered addicts from multiple fellowships, as we break down the big book line by line. In each 30-minute episode, we share our experience, strength, and hope in a real, raw, and practical roundtable discussion. So, if you are ready to learn and apply what you learn, tune in to Reco12 Big Book Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform.
Thank you so much, Max. Do you know what stood out? I love when you said in the early days, in that when young, and you could never look people in the eye, and I straight away, it's in one of the promises, isn't it? That we can then look the world in the eye now and can be alone at perfect ease and feel the nearness of our Creator. That's what come into my mind. That when we're looking at the floor and when you said emotionally abandoned and yeah, it was really lovely. Thank you so much, Max. So if anyone's got any questions, come in, or you can pop them in the chat if you want it anonymous. When you said, Max, that you didn't have an issue with God, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that? Did you already have a faith, or?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was 5 years old, my grandmother would pray with me once in a while, the Father's Prayer. And when I had, Mark, go ahead, man. Go ahead. Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Max. Sorry, I need to leave in like 5 minutes. I wanted to say a few words to you before I go. So I'm Mark. I'm an addict also. Thanks very much for your share. I identified with so much that you had to say. Your story is not actually that dissimilar to my own. One of the most important things I took from what you said was about complacency. I've been in CA for about 2.5 years, and the longest clean time I've had is just short of a year. And talking about daily action, like I came in as desperate as you described. And at that time, I found it easy because there's no much room for manoeuvre when you're so desperate. So desperation can be a real gift at times. But over time, complacency, feeling like I was willing to do recovery, but I wasn't as willing as I was when I first came in. So I had restrictions. So I'm only going to, and it's almost like the ego coming back. So I'd be like, I'm willing to go to meetings, but no more than 1 a week. Or I'll do step 12, but I'll do it when it suits me. I don't need to do that inventory. I don't need to pray today. And there's only one way that can go. The steps are a beautiful process, but in my experience, they can get undone. I hear a lot in meetings like 10, 11, and 12 are maintenance steps, and we should do them to stay well, and that's correct. But in my experience, if you don't do the right thing, as you go right down the steps, they can become undone. When I got to the point at the end where even step 1, I was questioning whether I was even powerless anymore. So it was quite clear I was when I first came in because I was so desperate. I'd burnt my life to the ground. But by not connecting a higher power, you get blocked off, don't you? And by the end, I was like, maybe it's just what happened in my life at that time. Maybe it's nothing to do with me being an addict. Maybe it's nothing to do with me not being able to manage my life. So I've been out of CA for about 10 months. I've only just came back just a few weeks ago. And yeah, you can probably guess the outcome. And the outcome is I learned again of how poorly I manage my life when I'm in control. So this time I need to take those lessons. I need to listen to what people have got to say, and I need to make sure that I understand that if you don't do this on a daily basis, you mentioned you do it as soon as you open your eyes. So it doesn't matter how much clean time you've got or how spiritual you are. Without maintenance, it's gone. Without that connection daily, you're just going to start sliding back down the hill as I did. So it's really good, listening to shares like yourself, Max, and getting reminders of, how incredible the program can be and how it really does change lives. And you look really well today. You look so peaceful, and that's what I want, So thanks so much for your sharing, and thanks for hosting the meeting, Lisa.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome, brother. If you want to, you can share your number in the chat. I'm going to share my number as well, okay? Let's keep in touch.
I will do. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, Mark. Thank you for sharing that, because we can get complacent, and like you say, the time, it really doesn't matter. All we have is a daily reprieve. And, if we let up, it tells us if we let up on the spiritual action program of action, then, we are heading for trouble. So thank you for sharing that, Mark. It's a great reminder. It really is. So yeah, Max, we were saying about I was asking about if your faith before and how did it change when you got in the program, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the beauty of it is, today I see that it's all a big plan. That it's God's plan. That my grandma was praying with me when I was 5 years old. Because my mother, as an actress, I don't think she has anything to do with God. In her case, and so my grandma did so, and 14 years later, I lived alone in Hanover in a small apartment, and I had a panic attack from smoking cannabis. I was really scared, instantly. And I lay on my bed, and the only thing I was basically left with was to pray, and I was praying, and I asked God to put his, sheltering hand above me. He did in a jiffy, So, wow. And when I was at my very rock bottom, by the end of 2021, I just shared on it that I was almost losing my right leg, So I was in hospital, and I was at the balcony. It was a big balcony at the 8th floor in Frankfurt. And I was smoking a cigarette. And I was also such an alcoholic. I brought a big bottle of lemonade, and half of it was vodka, and I was proud that no one could see it, because lemonade has the same color, I was just drinking on the terrace, and I was talking crazy shit. And there was a Turkish guy, a Muslim, and I just talked to him that I was desperate and I was looking for God, I guess. And then this guy, and it was beautiful, he spoke a prayer with me, and in the beginning, nothing happened. And 8 days later, in the hospital, I swear to God, I was lying in bed, and it was a beautiful day. Like I was drinking, and then I was sleeping for 2 or 3 hours, and I got awake at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and shortly after getting awake, I felt like gentle, soft flash all under my skin. I swear to God, going through my entire body for 2 or 3 minutes. And that was God. And that was the most beautiful feeling in my life. But still, I didn't stop, I was still keeping on using. And half a year later, I know today I was also so unhappy at my last rock bottom because I fully had lost my connection to God, In the end, when I was using, I even had a connection once in a while, but my real God were the drugs, So, of course, everything was basically cut off. And in the program, I got, that's why I said, when I was working the steps, I didn't have an issue with God,
Yeah, it's beautiful. And you touched on your daily practice a bit in there. Has your daily practice changed over the last 3 and a bit years, Max, or what does that look like today?
Yeah. I mean, the prayers are something they are fundamental, you know. I didn't change anything about my step one prayer, and I will never do that. But of course, other prayers, you know, I don't speak the third step prayer every day anymore. Currently, I speak the 7-step prayer, and I have some other prayers, and I also wrote my own prayers basically by implementing stuff from the big book, you know, just mixing up stuff from the 3rd and 7th-step prayer. But I always start my prayers with the 1st-step prayer, and I always end them with the Holy Father's prayer. You know, these prayers are fundamental, and this stuff gives me, you know, safety. You know, it also has a sheltering effect. You know, to do the same stuff every day, but at the same time, I also have to be cautious to not get. What's the English word for it? You know, like that it doesn't become too rigid. You get what I mean? Rigid, you know, my daily actions. And so I try to write other stuff in the gratitude list. And yeah, but I sometimes change stuff a little, you know.
Yeah, I agree, Max. It's a bit like I've got to watch that it doesn't become mechanical, like you say, rigid. Because if I'm just reading up, you know, this, and it's got to definitely, like you said, come from the heart and really mean it, or else is pointless, I guess. I love that. You touched on the amends as well. What would you say to people who are like, oh, I'm not sure if I can do this, you know, because many of us do get, you know, overwhelmed with the men's part in step 8 and 9. What would your advice be to anyone listening?
God always takes care with you, and you never go alone.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my sponsor said when I was really afraid to do them. And he said, I mean, I'm saying it in German, he said, Gott passt auf dich auf. And this exactly means God takes care of you. Exactly, you know, aufpassen means taking care of someone, like a father for his child. For me, God is my father, you know. He's always there, you know. So, yeah, just do. And also, we must not shrink at anything, like being said in the book, you know. And it really happened like this. In 9 of 10 cases, the unexpected happens. Full stop. And when I say these things to the guy and he doesn't do it, I can't help it, you know. I can't force anyone, you know.
Absolutely. And one last question. What would you say to a newcomer who's listening now, who's perhaps struggling? What would you say, Max, of suggestions of what is really important, what we, like you say, must not shrink on?
Never omit anything. Never omit anything. Never allow yourself to get into any kind of comfort zone. And relapse is not part of the program. Relapse is part of my story, in fact, but it's not part of the program. You know, there are sometimes newcomers who was like, yeah, it's part of, they even say it's part of recovery. What? It's as he would say, the sun is part of the moon, or the other way around. It's not. Totally weird, you know? Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It doesn't have to, it's definitely not part of the program. Oh, thank you so much again, Max. And it was such a great Reco12 speaker meeting. And it's for all addicts and their loved ones. If we didn't get to anybody's questions, or if anyone has any questions who's listening to this, please consider joining our WhatsApp community by sending an email to reco12pod@gmail.com. And there you can join in our community and answer any questions. If you'd like to be a future speaker on Reco12 Afro-Euro, please send an email to, again, reco12pod@gmail.com. if you've not yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcast, please go do so now. It's a great way to work step 12 in sharing this message with others. And I invite the audience to come back next week. We'll have another great speaker. And now it's over to you, Max, to lead us out with a prayer of your choice. Thank you, Max.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for your service. Absolutely. And after a moment of silence to remember the still suffering addict, I would like to lead us out with the Serenity Prayer in the I version. Who always loves and always protects us. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Okay, so there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Stick and stay. And when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it, you are worth it.